How to recognize when a market bottoms. Before I pull up the charts, everyone keeps asking me, Anthony, how do I know when the market is going to bottom? What should I be looking for? First off, I will tell you that there is no way to ever tell if a market's topped or if a market's bottomed. We never know until way later. But today, I'm going to show you my process for identifying market bottoms. On NinjaTrader, I pulled up a weekly E-mini S&P chart, and I'm only going to be using two indicators. My Bollinger Bands. You know I love my Bollinger Bands. 20 period, 3 standard deviation Bollinger Bands, and I'm going to be using an order flow anchored VWAP. You've seen me talk about the order flow anchored VWAP in previous shows. You can watch one of them right here. And how I use the order flow anchored VWAP on this weekly chart is by anchoring it to the monthly, meaning that each month you will see from the beginning of the month to the end of the month, the order flow VWAP. So I'm looking at this in a much wider time frame than I talk about in the other videos using the order flow anchored VWAP. Now, the reason why I choose these two indicators as my tools to determine market bottoms is because I want to look at, is the range expanding with Bollinger Bands, and are we holding above previous months anchored order flow VWAP, right? It's just a very simple thought process, right? If we're going to hold a low, is the range expansion starting to shrink, and are we holding above previous months VWAP? Now, let me go back to really 2019 to show you a couple examples before I get to today's market to show you how I determined that the market had put in a low in previous times. Here we are in 2019. You can see that the market was going to the downside pretty sharply. And then you had this weekly bar hit the bottom Bollinger Band, and then the Bollinger Band started to come back in. After we made that really kind of capitulation type low, which is something we've seen a lot in the past, almost like a V-type bottom, you saw that we started to build each and every month above the previous month's order flow VWAP. And those Bollinger Bands started to come in. And as you can see, for a long period of time, yeah, you definitely had some months where it got back below it. But when you started to look back from here, you recognize that that was a low. Now, I should say this is going to be something you're not going to recognize right away. But as that Bollinger Band starts to come in, you might be a week or two past that low, but at least you can identify that the trend has changed. And maybe we look to continue to grind up from a specific point. Now, this is the COVID low, right? Markets spiked, very sharp downturn, several weeks where we started to bounce off of that really capitulation low. But look what happened. Those Bollinger Bands started to come back in, and each and every week, we started to build above that anchored order flow VWAP for the month. Let me take you to today's chart. Here we are with a chart of today's markets, and as you can see, this is the 2022 sell-off. But go back here and look at this COVID low. The reason why I like this as a process is because I don't need to pick the low perfectly on the bottom. Look at how long of a bull market we were in after that low was determined. Too many people get caught up trying to buy that low. Well, for me, I could tell you on a personal level, I was still getting short a lot in there because I didn't know the low was determined. But once I started to see us build above that order flow VWAP and those weekly Bollinger Bands starting to come in, for me, I stopped getting short and I started to look only at the long side because I then knew that that could be the low. Now here we are with today's markets. As you can see right now, that Bollinger Band is just starting to open up on the top. We have been spending nothing but time below each of the previous month's VWAP. So to me, we are still in this process of determining a low until we see what? The markets start to come back down. Maybe you get a capitulation type move like you see here. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to have that, but that is what we have seen in the past. And then those Bollinger Bands start to come back in, and we see something like this, where we start to build off of the order flow VWAP previous months to see if the market could sustain above that VWAP. It's really just a very simple process, but it's one of those things you have to get out of your mind. Don't try to pick the low. Wait to see if you could identify when a low has formed. And as you can see in the past, there's a lot that could happen after you identified the low. Traders, cryptocurrencies have been on the move. Don't forget to check out Micro Ether futures. The symbol is MET, and they're 1/10 the size of 1 ETH. To learn more, go to cmegroup.com. To piggyback off of what I discussed today when traders are trying to find the low, I put this tweet out the other day. FOMO, which is fear of missing out, gets traders to counter trend trade, which in turn is why trends go further than you think. Think about it. Everybody is trying to pick the low, waiting for that counter trend big move because maybe they didn't catch the sell-off. So traders keep picking bottoms, trying to catch a rally, and they keep getting squeezed out lower. And maybe we do get a capitulation type low, but don't keep looking for a counter trend trade. As I showed you on the weekly chart, we are still in this formation of trying to find the low. We're never going to know when the low happens, but we will use the tools to find out later when those Bollinger Bands may be closed that maybe the market has found a low. Happy 4th of July to all my American trader friends out there. Make sure you get some R&R this weekend. We work hard as traders, and it's important to take time off when the markets are closed and get real rest. Traders, never miss an episode of Develop Your Edge. Click that subscribe button right there. You can also DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open at Anthony Crudele. Don't forget to check out Instagram and TikTok at Anthony C. Crudele. Watch out for the fakes. See you next week.